And I should have said before, if anyone is coming up to speak, to please say your name when you come up to the table. So the first questions are about business plans. And Minister, we have received the 2024 business plan, which is based on the JHA ministerial plans 24 to 27, and as such provides a list of key objectives based on the government plan funding approved in December 23. Can you briefly explain what are the key changes to the funding on the scope of the key objectives?
I think in relation to the funding, I think from our perspective, we are business as usual. There's no sort of key changes. We will be producing a department plan, not a ministerial plan. And obviously it will contain reference to the work across GOJ to achieve the Minister's my objectives, which obviously one of those examples is the violence against women and girls. And so we will be making those plans to extend cover from January 25 all the way through to April 26 in order that it takes us up to the next election. So our plan will be obviously a collaborative one, which will, although it will be specific to my portfolio, it'll be shared with the relevant parties on GOJ to ensure that we are working to the same aim. The plan will largely be based on the information provided to the panel, on the 12th of September, which include investment in public and firefighter safety, violence against women and girls commitments, legislative schedule of work, and major and strategic project objectives.
Okay. We note from your letter to us of 12th of September that business plans will not be completed until the end of 2024 and published in early 25. So how do you propose that scrutiny will be able to scrutinise these plans properly if they're not available?
The timetable's changed a little bit, so do you want me to come
Yes.
in? So conscious of the discussions in the States Assembly and in the Chief Minister's hearings, for example, with CSSP, the team are just looking at the timing for the publication of the plans. I'm just sort of watching the latest as there's a meeting on at the moment. So the aim is definitely to ensure that they're published by the middle of December as things stand. But I haven't got the further detail on how that times with the government plan debate at the moment. For Justice and Home Affairs, because as the Minister says, ours is reasonably similar to this year's, is in line with the already published ministerial plan up to 27, and doesn't have a huge amount of change or new investment in it because of the profile of the budget this year. We think ours will actually be fairly simple and straightforward to draw together, and we would seek to aim to publish it in draft as soon as we can. That will take a number of weeks to do, but if you leave it with us, we take the point that you need to see that information. It will be substantively based on the information that we wrote to the panel, the Minister wrote to the panel about on the 12th of September. So that letter and the highlights the Minister's just given you from it will be the basis of the plan. I would say that if you read that letter in conjunction with the 24 business plan, you'd have a pretty good view on what the 25 one will say, but we will work on that and get it to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, thank you. So you stated that the priorities will be very similar to those of 24, but can you list any changes being made and the impact, especially on frontline services?
So if you want me to come in, there isn't any really substantive change in strategic position or policy or operational function other than where we've got investment. So obviously got the respective chiefs here, and I know you've got question sections later where the return we're seeing on the investment in the services can be explained. So that will continue. It was always envisaged that those services investment plans would take a number of years to continue through them. So we'll see that continue in 25. There isn't anything significant other than that continued investment that changes between 24 and 25, mainly frontline operational department, and that's where the focus is. There will be continuation of legislation and policy development, which again I think will you'll have questions on later in the hearing, but there isn't any substantive dramatic change in our plans for 25 as opposed to 24.
Okay, so going back to the business plans, we haven't received them for capital projects as well, which include ambulance, fire and rescue headquarters and the Army and Sea Cadets headquarters. So is there a reason we haven't received these?
We wouldn't normally cover them in any length other than a mention in the departmental business plan. We can certainly provide the panel with more detail on what activity we expect to happen on those projects in 25, and we can promise to write to you with a project update in there. They'll be referred to in the business plan, but only at very high level.
Okay, right. Yes, because so my next question was when can we expect to see the business case and full costing of these projects? So that's what you're telling us we'll receive.
So if we take each of those projects in turn, the Ambulance and Fire and Rescue Headquarters is in a feasibility stage at the moment to explore what the potential for two different HQs looks like as opposed to a joint one. That feasibility work will be concluded by the end of this year, and we've offered to come and give the panel a private briefing on that. That won't, as a result of that, that won't be moved through to full business case stage, a new outline business case stage for some time because the funding doesn't kick in till 28. On the Army and Sea Cadet HQ, that's in sort of design and feasibility stage at the moment. So we've got an outline business case in place already. And once we've got the further work and costings on that, it would move to full business case stage. We haven't started writing that yet because the design and feasibility work is still underway on the preferred location. So once we've done that, we would move to full business case stage once we've tendered that work. So perhaps if we set out a timeline for the panel of where we'd anticipate being with each of these projects over 25, and then we can make sure we're providing you with the right information at the right time.
That would be very good, yes, very useful. My next question was when are the new revised ministerial plans due to be published? But my understanding is you're saying it's going to be department plans.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. The next topic is going to be based around the savings that you've published. We note that you're due to make savings of 334,000 in 25 and 365 in 26. How will these savings be achieved?
I think for all of JHA, the exact method of delivering these savings is still under consideration with obviously SLT, and when the work is complete they will advise me on a range of the options which can be considered in order to ensure that those savings are delivered. This will include a very small reduction in the number of senior roles in the department. The savings were calculated as a proportion of civil servants grade 11 in the department. We fully recognise the savings apportionment for the department was very small in comparison with other departments, recognising that obviously these are primarily frontline nature services departments, and so it's essential to provide those services. The savings will also include a reduction in previously agreed growth, which started in 2024. It is obvious that the department is also carrying a number of cost pressures, which again, the senior leadership team in JHA are working to resolve, treat, mitigate or accept on a risk-assessed basis and focusing on what is essential to deliver frontline services safely and what can be paused or deferred. An example of this would be the provision of training, development or equipment purchasing in some services. The detail of this is being worked on, and again, the Chief Officer will provide me with options as and when that work is actually done. I don't know if you want to add anything further to that.
Yeah, that's accurate in terms of where we are. We've got to make sure that we can cope with the savings and the cost pressures.
This panel has always been concerned about frontline services and the cost pressures on the front line. I'll move on to a question which relates directly to it. Note that the States of Jersey Police are due to make savings of 172,000 in 25 and 187 in 26. what impact will these savings have on the resources within the police, and what contingency plan is in place, if any, to cover any impact of resourcing problems?
I'll ask Robin to speak in a minute, but what I would like to say to the panel is that obviously, as you all appreciate, it is a challenge for any frontline services to have to make savings, but Robin will explain a little bit better. But what I would like to say is that both myself and the Chief Minister and Robin have agreed that we will keep this process being monitored, if you like, to ensure that we are still able to deliver frontline services. But I think I'll ask Robin to sort of fulfil a bit more in
Thank you, Minister. As has already been mentioned in the panel, it's not just the savings; it's also the cost pressures, and those cost pressures continue to go up. So, for example, in the non-pay side of things, our IT licences, particularly with the Home Office, so we have connections into the Home Office to go to a number of very, very important databases. For example, that bill has increased by 102% since 2021. Our digital forensics unit, which is how we investigate nearly all our crimes now, very effectively, I might say, because it reduces the cost into places like the Royal Courts and all the rest of it because of more guilty pleas. That software is always moving on, always becoming more complicated and therefore more costly. Everybody is familiar with utility costs have arisen, and utility costs have risen by 22% for us, and we have a 65% electric fleet, and we hope to get even closer to the 100%, as well as other costs around training, particularly related to firearms training. So it's not just the savings, it's also the additional costs, which of course everyone has, and we all accept those costs have gone up, but the budget doesn't necessarily come along with it, so efficiencies are required. You may not have received it yet, but the Police Authority have just written, or are just about to write to you as chair, as a request of, some of their observations and whatever. So in terms of the savings that we will make into next year and the year after, as I think I may have mentioned already to this panel and indeed to somewhere else, we will not be recruiting to police staff posts, so not police officer posts, police staff posts. Those spots do not involve redundancy, so they were vacant. So we plan to use additional efficiencies, a very small restructure. On the 18th of this month, the senior team and I and a couple of others will be looking at, in much more detail, how we might have to now restructure some of our organisation to accommodate not just the savings for 2025, but also I think probably the pressure is more so in 2026 because two consecutive governments now have been incredibly supportive, and I'm not shy in saying that, incredibly supportive, as you would expect for the major incidents that the island has suffered. And we continue to be properly funded. It's not just about the capacity, it's also the capability. It's, we may have the money, but we also need the people. So we have used that in an entirely transparent way with Treasury to help us deal with what we would describe as the business as usual. Because of course we remove staff from their day jobs effectively to investigate the major incidents, and we've been busy on that regard too. So we are, and the Police Authority have referenced this in the letter they're sending you, that we recognise the support we've had from government for the major incidents, which we believe have every confidence will continue into next year as wherever that takes us. The final point is just to reaffirm what the Minister says, and indeed the Chief Minister said this to me too, that he will meet with us in the autumn, I suppose we're there now, to discuss the future of the budget, the police budget, given he recognises that it's important.
In those savings, Chief, are quite considerable, and we're anxious, obviously, I'm sure the panel will agree, that we're anxious that with the proportion of the manpower expenses within your department are very high as a percentage of total, and that means that these VFM savings ongoing are going to impact on frontline. Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
I think it's inevitable that there must be some impact. My job And that's just where I will be held to account by the authority and indeed the minister, is to look at where that inevitability, if you like, is minimised to its greatest extent. So I'm very confident that islanders won't see any difference in terms of our ability to respond to 999s and deal with major crime and major incidents. I'm very confident about that. And those are the things that I think really, really matter.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Minister. You have highlighted that an outline of changes to staff posts and restructuring within your department and the anticipated resultant savings and impact on service delivery are as follows. 100k allocated to staff costs, 144 allocated to non-pay, and 200k allocated to staff costs and 165 allocated to non-pay in the 2 years. How is the JHA senior leadership team developing plans to ensure that these savings are delivered?
So that is the summary, the high-level summary that we gave when the Minister wrote to you on the 12th of September. What we're doing is, a little bit like Robin said he and his team will be doing for the police, is looking at what the combined effect of those savings and the cost pressures we've referred to looks like. The allocation of the savings in the government plan of the budget is, as you've said, so in part staff savings and in part non-staff savings. We do recognise very much at the high level when we're working on that is a very much smaller proportion of savings than many other government departments have had. But it is going to have an impact somewhere. And as Robin said, what we're doing for my part of the department is looking at what we can do to deliver those savings and cope with the cost pressures whilst having the minimal effect on frontline delivery. Some of that does mean, as the Minister referred to earlier, deferring or pausing expenditure, which will inevitably need to come later, but is done at a different time. And that's primarily around investing in equipment, assets, and also training of our people. And so there are some risks around that we will be discussing with the Minister around the options that we can take, and being very clear and transparent with the Minister what those risks are. We will also be looking at what other non-staff costs we can bear down on, but as you've said, the primary weight of expenditure in the department is people. It's about 89% people with some non-staff and then some income making up the rest. So there's not much to go at in the non-staff space, and there's hardly anything to go at in the non-staff space that isn't training or equipment for our people. So it is going to be difficult, but we do very much appreciate that it's a much, the savings are proportionately less impactful on us as a frontline department than they are for others, and we will work on that basis, bring options to the Minister, and then make sure that we can deliver a balanced budget next year.
I mean, I think I speak on behalf of the panel in saying that we still remain concerned about these savings and how it may impact on some of the equipment that is your department in particular, Chief Fire Officer, and are maintaining, and indeed yours, Chief Ambulance and Robin. We remain concerned about how that's going to impact on potential incidents in the future.
Yeah, so there's probably just 2 points that would be helpful to elaborate on there. So in discussion with the Treasurer, he fully recognises that the combination of savings and cost pressures for us does potentially create a people impact, which isn't intended but is inevitable. And he's invited me to continue to talk. There's no sort of magic pot of money, but he's invited me to continue to carry on talking to him to make sure that he's aware of perhaps operational risks that we're concerned about arising as a result of that position once we've done the options work and discussed it with the Minister. And also the other thing around the assets is that we've been very pleased to have a slightly higher allocation for minor capital in this budget for JHA. It's 380,000 per year for my part of the department and 350 for Robin's part, which is a significant increase in previous years where it was about 100 or 150 broadly for each of us. And that will enable us to get through more quickly quite a significant asset replacement programme of all the things you need to run fire services and ambulance services and prisons and, all those. It's just a very stuff-heavy environment. But also the Treasurer has invited me to make sure that we continue a dialogue with him on that, if there are things we really absolutely definitely need but can't do within that 380 once it's all been prioritised, we can at least have a conversation with him to see if those pressures can be in some way mitigated. So I'm concerned, but I'm confident we've got a discussion that can be had in the future if we think that risks are not worth taking.
I'd just like to register publicly again that we are still concerned about this.
I'd just like to reiterate what Kate was just saying there as well, because I've also met with the Treasurer, so I am quite confident, as Kate says, that she's keeping him up to date, because I've also met with him as well during this period.
All right,
Yes.
okay.
Ken? Quite a lot of my first question there has been answered in your very comprehensive answer about risk and investment and etc. So just to come back really to the issue about deferring training, potentially deferring equipment process and reprofiling the budget. Following publication of the reports by UK government following the inquest of Grenfell Tower and Manchester Arena, what training programmes are in place to adopt national practice for Jersey to make sure that we are up to speed with the findings of both of those inquiries?
I will hand over to Paul, because obviously he's got a far better knowledge of the in-depth, but obviously it is identified by us that obviously we're a small jurisdiction, and obviously we still have the same inherent things that will come with that. So, you know, we've still got the built environment, we've got, you know, still got high rises and all of those sorts of things. So I think the thing is that we as an island need to identify that and ensure that we do our best to be able to make sure that people are safe. But I'll hand over to Paul, who can give you a far more technical in-depth of all of that.
Thank you, Minister. And I think it's worth saying as well, that, and as you know anyway, if we take it in the round, for example, the Manchester Arena inquiry, Grenfell Phase 1, which reported in 2019, and Phase 2, which reported last month, that will encompass lots of responders in some areas, and then you know a smaller number in other areas, and it speaks across responding to emergencies, but also trying to stop them from happening in the first place. And of course, the Phase 2 to Grenfell Tower inquiry is talking about a systemic failure that led to the problem that in the event was unsurmountable. What I'd also say is these events, and it's horrible that it happens, these events and tragic events tend to raise the standard of our counterparts' activities in the UK. That tends to, and we model our policing, fire and ambulance services on the UK model. It's very difficult to have the capacity to create your own or copy something that's more distant. So that bar gets raised through tragic circumstances, and new standards are achieved. And I think also, with the learning from things like Manchester Arena, Grenfell in particular, there are new challenges and new risks that are discovered. So we see from the Phase 2 report, for example, that something that had a certificate to say that it was compliant with some fire safety standards because it was tested wasn't compliant with those fire safety standards, and not only did it not resist the spread of fire, it promoted the spread of fire. That sort of level of fundamental failure is a new risk and a new challenge for us to have to grapple with, and it creates lots and lots of things for us to do. It's very, very challenging. So that bar has been raised, and of course in my sector, in the fire and rescue sector, the bringing back of an HMI that covers policing and fire, that raises the bar as well. As those professional bars are raising, of course, you know, we have to try and work out how we're going to follow that with a limited capacity. As the Minister says, Jersey's a pretty active and well-established place, and so it has a higher per capita rate of high-rise residential buildings than almost anywhere outside of London. If you were to take the British Islands, if you like, and Channel Islands, into that, it's not small. There's a lot going on. We are a busy fire and rescue service by any standards. By English standards, we are a very busy fire and rescue service, if you were to compare us with our colleagues over there. So there's a lot of gap to fill. It is quite challenging. What we are doing, and of course, from previous government and previous government before that, recognition that there's work to be done, recognition that investment's required, and we're really delighted that we received that support. And I know you know that very well, you know, through that phase, and we still continue to get that support. So we're in a phase at the moment of trying to put in place programmes to do as much work as possible, but it is challenging, and that's why, as Kate says, this isn't a short-term solution. This is more of a medium and longer term solution as well.
I guess the issue for us is that, you know, some of the reductions in budget, some of the savings that have been given, say we won't affect frontline services. But if you haven't got the back office who's able to support you doing the policy work and keep a weather eye on Grenfell, that ultimately will affect the frontline services and ultimately affect the safety of the islanders in general. So I guess what we're getting at is, and something I suppose that the Chief Officer has relayed as well, that just because you were saying that it doesn't affect the front line, the fact that your savings are being hit in the back office does affect the front line.
And I think Kate alluded to this before, actually. I think at the moment, in the next year or so, we are in a phase of growth. We are trying to recruit people into key roles, particularly at the moment fire safety roles, where we're expanding the size of that team. Fire safety is absolutely critical to the strategic response to some of the issues that we find from those reports. So the money comes in, then you start the recruitment, because you can't start recruiting until you know that you've got the money. So there's always a lag, and I think what we're doing is accidentally benefiting from that natural lag now. We are struggling a little bit to find access to people with the right skills and resources to go into leadership roles.
And has the recruitment,
that'll save the day for a while.
Has the recruitment freeze of grade 11 and above had an impact on you doing that work?
Not in fire and rescue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not in the department as a whole, because we can make the case for essential and frontline roles still being recruited at grade 11 and above, with permission from me and the Chief Executive Officer. I haven't put one of those forward yet, but for example, we will in due course be recruiting a new prison governor, and I don't expect that to be a problem in relation to the recruitment freeze.
And again, with States of Jersey Police, you've talked about having restructuring, and then therefore you won't be replacing 2 vacancies for police staff. Does that mean that you will have to allocate very expensive police officers to do the tasks that those police staff were doing?
No is the answer to that question, but it's something that we are always mindful of because that is not a best use of resource. And indeed, over the last few years, we have had one particular sergeant from memory who was in doing our duties, and of course that wasn't a sensible use of money, and that post was redeployed. Just picking up on the fire chief's points, one of the learning points from Manchester, which has been mentioned a couple of times, and one of the criticisms that came out of the public inquiry was that there was not the appropriate investment into the emergency planning team, where the reverse is the case, particularly in recent months, where government have increased. And it's these people who are rarely seen, who do enormous amounts of work in the background for the time when the bad thing happens. So where I get reassurance from, and hope to give reassurance to the panel, is government, and it's Kate Bryden who's led on this, has increased the number of people in our emergency planning team, and only yesterday, one of them and others were deployed at the ferry port for Operation Turbo to practice again our joint interoperability, test again, bearing in mind we've had plenty of opportunity to learn, but we still had various emergency services at the ferry port yesterday practicing.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add something to what Robin's just said, and this is what, for me, in this role is critical, is that what I've seen, like many others, have seen an erosion of things like your emergency planning. But we should never, ever allow those types of roles to actually go, because they are exactly what they say on the tin, and that saves a lot of money in the long term.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. In 2024, the ambulance underwent restructuring, and the new posts were identified and recruited to. How has these extra staff allowed you to increase daytime resilience, and how this established how to invest to increase the resilience in the night shift?
Happy for you to go with it.
Thank you, Minister. So we've added a fourth crew during the daytime now from the staff, the additional staff that we've had, which we were very grateful for. That's increased, obviously, our resilience during the day. The evening part, we're just starting a piece of work with the staff coming up with the unions to look at how we cover the evening period. So a lot of shifts have been covered in addition on the evening period from the additional staff that we put in, but it's not been regularised into a shift roster pattern yet. So that's something we're looking at, and we've just written to the unions recently to engage with them on what that looks like. We'd obviously done that on the back of a demand and capacity review that looked at the the times that we needed to put on more capacity to deal with that demand, which was initially from 7 till 1 o'clock in the morning, and recently spoken about the need to refresh that on the fact that our calls are still rising. So we've seen an increase already this year. So,
has any additional funding, going back again, required following this restructuring?
So that funding was provided within the 2024 business case, and a few adjustments that we've made internally within the service. There's not currently any required for the current model.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. So I have some questions now about the criminal offences confiscation fund. So, Minister, there are no balance transfers in the proposed budget from the criminal offences confiscation fund to the consolidated fund. Can you tell us about the projects that were being funded from this fund, whether they're ongoing, complete, etc.?
Yeah, the amounts allocated in the budget are carry forwards. So effectively what you've got is you've got the firearms range, which is being paid out of the COCF, and you've also got Dewberry House, which is being paid out of the part of it's being paid out of that fund as well. There is going to be a further request in relation to the COCF funding in relation to potential for the laptops for the Honorary Police, but those requests that are in there at the moment are actually projects that are happening this year, which are going to happen, basically, the two that I've actually identified.
Okay. And I also had a note about the prison improvement phase.
Oh, yes, sorry, yeah, that's those things are continuing.
So that's the funds are there
Yeah,
for them.
those funds are
and
there,
they're
they haven't
continuing.
changed.
On Dewberry House, though, on the matter of Dewberry House, I remember there was a shortfall of funding available for what had been planned. So I don't think that's been addressed in the budget. Can you provide us with an update about that project?
Do you want either me or Robin to take that?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm not sure how the size of that is, and that could be as a result of rising costs, as we've seen in the local media about costs of materials and whatever. But I would not have a precise answer to that, so I would prefer to just write to you on that point so that I can be accurate.
Okay, thanks. And my next question was to ask about the total project costs for Dewberry House, but shall we get the response there? Okay, so we'll just wait to hear back on that. Thank you. Okay, Helen, that's
Okay.
you next.
I've got a few random questions about funding lines in the budget. 425,000 is allocated to the passport project for 25 and 26. The question here is that adequate, and do you think the work will be completed by the end of 2026?
Okay. I think it is accurately profiled. The piece of work has been outstanding for some years. That has been reprofiled to modern day costs, and our understanding from the Home Office is that we are now in their priority portfolio for that piece of work to be done. It's the system needed to replace the current passport system, which is called Gypsy, with a new version so that we can have, don't know why it's called Gypsy, so that we love a different name for things. It's like Caesar. So it will replace that with a fully digital passport system that the UK already have, but preserving the island variant approach. It's a collaborative piece of work with Guernsey, Gibraltar and the Isle of Man and us. We have a long-term engaged contracted project lead for it, who is the interface between those island jurisdictions and the Home Office, who works very closely on those costs, and I'm confident that they are accurate and that as soon as we press go on the project, which is due to be before the end of this year, it will run as planned and be completed by the end of 26.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask, because I think we've just had the report released about the consultancy projects. Evidently there is a fee, a sum in there for consultancy. Can you just confirm that that consultancy will continue despite the effort to reduce the use of consultants across the public service?
Yes, so it's been regarded as a technical, which still needs approval. We've cited the chief exec on it, although actually the approval for technical stops with me, because it's such an important priority project for us. And the contract with that project lead is due to be extended for, so we're doing it in good time, from May 25 for 2 years, so that it sees it through to the completion of the project.
It's fed into the
Yeah.
project plan, so that's lovely, thank you. We also note that the combined control room funding for 2025 is 450,000. Can you just tell us some more about what that funding covers and if you're confident that no further funding will be required?
So that covers the residual technical aspects that need to be done in relation to the combined control centre. So that, emergency services control centre, which are the completion of the IX project, which is a sort of integrated headset for, this is on the ambulance and fire and rescue side of the room. The police are potentially using a slightly different solution. It will also cover some integration work that's needed for new mobile devices for ambulance and fire and rescue that are being funded slightly separately, to make sure that the interface between the vehicles and the information the crew needs and the control room is right. And it will probably also include some subject matter expertise contracted in again on a technical basis for ambulance and fire and rescue, both of which have just had peer reviews of the service and the control function interaction. And we've got a number of recommendations arising as a result of that. I can't be completely sure that that will be the end of it, because actually it's a really important priority area for us, and we will need to continue to invest in the ESCC to make sure it's as effective and efficient as possible. Much of it is discharging the Minister's statutory responsibilities and those of the chiefs. So it might be that we do need a further programme of improvement work, but we would build a case for that separately in due course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, just to confirm that the consultancy element of that, because I know some of that is being provided by local consultants, will continue throughout.
Well, so much of all of the local consultancy was actually stopped at the beginning of last year.
Okay.
Need to check that. In terms of project management consultancy. But the only thing we have remaining now is the real technical consultancy about the system, it's Motorola, people like that. The subject matter expertise that would come in the future from fire and rescue and ambulance specialists. And also we have a consultant in there on a contract to chair the 999 liaison committee, who's an expert in the field. And again, I'd expect that to continue next year and fit within the technical category.
Okay, thank you. You stated in your letter as well that you've got 2 staff employed as data analysts, one dedicated to violence against women and girls. Again, the question is, have you got adequate funding for that? Have you got enough capacity within that data analysis team to do what needs to be done for the VORG staff?
Do you want to come back in on that? Do you want me to go? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have those 2 people in post now, and they're making a very significant impact. It's the first time that we've had a proper data analyst and lead in the department. Police have had their own arrangements for some time, but we're really seeing an impact in relation to that. And there is also a separate person in post as the data analyst for VORG, essentially, who's making very good progress on bringing the data set we need to support not just the implementation of the recommendations, but what that whole piece looks like strategically going forward.
When do you think they might be reporting
I
the first bit about the
think
prevalence of VORG?
The first data set is due to be published at the end of Q1 next year, but I'll check that, and when we write to you from the previous hearing about VORG recommendation implementation update, we can include it in that. So yeah, we're confident that we've got the horsepower we need there now, which is the person power rather. That kind of phrase I did, yeah. Person power to take it forward. Yeah, sorry.
Just the last question on that section. The modern slavery work has been introduced into your work programme. Currently, you've said it's in the early development phase. again, are you confident that you've got the right resources so that it will progress on time?
Yeah, I'm confident that we've got those resources to be able to continue that work. I mean, as I said, we really need to sort of actually look at the scope closely. But we've obviously we'll be looking to certainly progress that work in the next 18 months, 2 years.
Thank you. My last question around what's in the budget and what isn't relates to honorary policing. And the proposed budget doesn't include any central funding to parishes to support the essential functions of the honorary police. I know we talked about making an application to COCF for laptops, etc. But I think we're just interested to know what your position is, Minister, about providing central funding to parishes for kind of core policing functions that obviously support the state's police.
Right, well, in recent weeks we've had a meeting with the Attorney General, myself, I think, were you, Robin?
I have spoken to the
Yeah,
Attorney
I think,
General.
I can't remember exactly, but we've certainly met with the Attorney General because this is on my priority list. I think it's difficult, we obviously can't fund it from policing funds for obvious reasons because there isn't sufficient to do that. But we are mindful that we need to look at how we're going to do that resourcing. So in relation to things like laptops, radios, that type of thing, we've formed a group, we've met on it, and we will continue to do that. And I meet regularly with the Attorney General anyway, and it will be continually going forward. So I'm minded we do need to fund them in some way, shape or form. We just actually need to decide how that's going to be and where it's going to come from, because I do think that is a fact.
Yeah, I think the thing that the thinking around that is actually, you know, honorary policing in Jersey provides a very useful and very comprehensive support to States of Jersey Police. If you looked at the UK, you wouldn't expect special constables to be funding their radios, their laptops, etc., etc.
Exactly.
And I know it's something that has been raised at parish level by provisioners.
Yeah.
You know, the ratepayers' money going into provision of vehicles. So I think we just want to understand from a JHA perspective whether there's an appetite to consider what level of central government funding should be put into a budget to provide. I think the Chief...
Yes, if I could just, coincidentally, I'm seeing João Camara on Monday, and we've discussed this a number of times, and I've spoken to the Attorney General, who is very receptive. It occurs to me sometimes that our honorary police colleagues are sort of going around cap in hand, and we've only got to, as you've just touched upon, Deputy, we know what they cost, we don't know what they save, and just look at the Royal Visit. A massive effort on a bank holiday, which would have cost the island, if they had put in a bill, way beyond anything I think we would have even suggested as part of laptops and whatever. So I am strongly supportive of there being a central fund where our honorary colleagues can use it, you know, in a transparent way for things that they need to provide services to the island.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand...
Yes. Mark?
Yes, Sea Cadets and Army Cadets, Minister. What discussion have you had with the Sea Cadets and the Army Cadets to ensure the proposed funding of 4.9 million is adequate and the proposed premises are adequate to accommodate any growing numbers in the future?
Obviously, the Sea Cadets are funded by us for $20,000 a year, which is a grant awarded annually following the return of financial information related to the previous year. In relation to the headquarters, etc., I think that matter was discussed earlier, but I don't know whether you want...
Yeah, I can probably elaborate slightly further. So the 4.9 is the total amount that's allocated in the government plan with this budget. It's been there a number of years as we've been working on the feasibility. There have been a number of different sites in play in that time. We've had good discussions with the Army and Sea Cadet leaders, which continue. I think we're narrowing now down onto a viable option, working closely with Jersey Property Holdings and continuing to work closely with the cadet leaders. I would hope that we'd be able to brief the panel on that in a bit more detail in the next few months as we get agreement around that. It needs to go up through ministerial government agreement route first. We are maintaining with the cadet leaders that 4.9 million in the plan is the maximum amount available, so that the development plans need to fit within that amount. There has been some talk from the Sea Cadet leaders about potentially fundraising to contribute more. So we're looking at how perhaps the development could be phased so that the main responsibility for government from that proposition a number of years ago is discharged through the money available. And then if there is a sort of value add from them seeking fundraising and sponsoring, that can be added in a slightly different part of the site, either at the same time if the money's available, their fundraising money is available, or perhaps later. So trying to take a slightly more dynamic approach to it, essentially, so that we can recognise that, particularly for Sea Cadets, their membership has significantly grown, but that really government's contribution to their facility should be to provide them a core facility, and that if there is extras to add, that perhaps that could be done in a slightly different way. So that's the discussion we've had so far. And as I say, hopefully we can bring forward a firmer conclusion of where we think the final site will be and what the timeline for it will be to the panel in the next couple of months.
We had a visit to their headquarters at Rouge Bouillon,
Yeah.
and we're incredibly impressed by what we saw, so we're fully supportive. There's so much uncertainty over Fort Regent. We really are in the dark over that one. The premises there will continue to act as a base for these units. Is that fair to say, or is that the uncertainty bearing some impact on that?
So the Sea Cadets vacated their unit at Fort Regent a number of years ago, and as you've said, were relocated to Rouge Bouillon. We've slightly alleviated the pressure of needing to move them from Rouge Bouillon by the timeline for the ambulance and fire and rescue development now being later. So they're sort of safe and sound where they are. Returning to the fort is a strong option for the Sea Cadets, and redeveloping that whole area is certainly being considered. It does need to dovetail, of course, with whatever the wider strategic plan for Fort Regent is, and ministers are in sort of an early stage of a refresh of thinking about that, as I understand it. So we'll be working closely with Infrastructure and Environment and Jersey Property Holdings on what those plans for the fort might look like, and how any proposal to move the cadets back to their former area would dovetail with the wider plan. Getting those two things lined up is very important to us.
I mean, should, for whatever reason, as I said, with the uncertainty over Fort Regent, if that premise is not available, do you have any contingencies for that particular option?
We have one or two other options that we've looked at previously and ruled out for a variety of reasons that we could revisit. But obviously it's incumbent on us to make sure there is a solution, partly because we've temporarily put the Sea Cadets in a building that we will eventually want to vacate and destroy, and partly because, of course, there's the proposition from 2020 that we need to make sure that we fulfil.
Excellent. Well, that's all from me, Chair.
Yeah, if I could just add a question to that. We've heard before about the plans for the joint headquarters for Sea Cadets and Army Cadets. Is there any consideration for not having a joint headquarters?
We're still aiming for joint. I think there's a real advantage to one set of government investment providing for both cadet forces, and the cadet leaders are working well together on that. The financial constraint is causing some space constraint that we are looking at with both forces. In some ways, the absolute priority has to be to move the Sea Cadets for the reasons I've just described. And it's always been a sort of additional benefit that we can also enhance facilities for the Army Cadets at the same time. Their facilities at Lacane Barracks are not ideal in a number of ways. So we're looking at how, as I said, we can do that perhaps slightly more dynamically. So how can we, if it is the site of the fort, how can we make sure that we maximise the space, the totality of the space available in that area, to make sure it is actually a joint facility, or that at least in some respects it's joint. So it may be that the Army Cadets end up retaining a base at the barracks, but using those joint facilities in a slightly different way to how we first envisaged. But that's all in play at the moment, and for me it's really important to get a solution that works for everyone, that's affordable, that we can move forward on. So we're still working on that now.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we finished our questions, but while we've got you all here, I wonder if I could
Sounds
add
dangerous.
a question. We've talked a few times about, is it Tetris? Let me get my words right.
Tetra.
Tetra,
I'm sure
Radio.
Yeah.
Helen is more familiar with it than I am, but when I first became Conotab in 22, this was still in our budget, and it remained in our budget, and it was a considerable chunk of budget. At that time, it was 14,000 to update the honorary police system, and I was greatly concerned that it stayed in the scenario with no real advancement in the system development, as it were, or the how it combined with yours. Has there been any advancement on
Yeah,
that? As
what's
where we
happening
are
with it?
that?
That's what we wanted to know.
I can give you an overview if you like.
Yeah, fine.
Somehow I'm the SRO for what was the Tetra replacement project and still will be. So Tetra refers to the technology. Basically, it's radio this way, but an awful lot of it happens underground, essentially. We are sort of in abeyance, really, in terms of the big strategic replacement project, because we are waiting to see what happens in the UK. The technology moves on in significant ways, and you've probably heard of Airwave in the UK, so that's what the emergency services use in the UK. All of the blue light agencies and others use Airwave. It's a Tetra-based technology, so it's the same sort of radio system, very much bigger. And they've been working for some years now on trying to roll out a new emergency services communication system. And that has been beset by a number of problems, contractual, financial, technological. And so what we've done is wanted to sort of, my strategy, if you like, on that is to sit behind that, watch what happens, so that we can learn from and not fall down any of the holes that have appeared in the road in front of the colleagues in the UK who are doing a very big but similar project, if you like. So the Tetra system stands. We have funding available now, and we are updating the software, we're updating servers because it's all a computer-based radio system. We are updating radio handsets. There are various bits and pieces going on. So essentially what we're doing is keeping the current system going in a sort of as new as possible way. They can integrate. The system network allows honorary police, if that's what we need to do. That can happen. That whole system will do that for us. So it's still a very usable system, still has life in it. We do know that it is going to need to go into a next phase and a new technology, but we just want to watch what the UK does.
And I guess the question is that, you look at things from a government side, so how many firefighters you've got, how many police officers you've got, who is looking at how many honorary police officers there are.
That's
because
also
it tends
in there.
to be kind of rolled back to the parishes as an afterthought, so they end up with having to replace their own equipment, which links into the previous question.
There's a lot of work going on, and always has been, but I think we're resurrecting some of the sort of user group forum work that's going on. We know, and it's always been an odd or an interesting funding approach, really,
Yes.
because the system costs what the system costs. And if people are disincentivised to pay for their units, the system cost doesn't go down. All that happens is all of the other
Somebody
units get
else
a little
has
bit
to
more
pay.
expensive. So we are making sure that we have early conversations and making sure that everybody is heard and listened to in that process. So, for example, at the moment, so we went through quite a long period where that funding was disaggregated. So, for example, you'd find a pot of money in the policing budget, pot of money in the fire and rescue service budget, pot of money in the ambulance service budget, because in terms of generally accepted accounting principles, you needed to show where the costs were being incurred. Actually, I think there's been some rethinking about that in terms of centralising that model. Because actually it costs what it costs. You can't change that cost, and as long as you can show it and show who's using it, I think those are the important things, and support them in using it.
I mean, if I may, Chair, I think now for the last 2 years, the principal worries that we have concerning this system is all of my colleagues on the committee to Conotab, some of them in a similar situation, is they have so many of these units that are now running out of their sell-by date, they're charging units, some of them are working, some of them aren't, but we're constantly saying, well, we can't replace until if a new system comes in, we don't want to replace all our old units, only then to become obsolete.
Yeah.
Where we've all been in abeyance, and we're just keen that you give us some direction.
I think that the problem of replacing something and then the system changing is some way off, if I can put it that way. Just judging what's going on in the UK. So, for example, in terms of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, they were talking about firefighters, and so fire and rescue. You will see wear different handheld radios to everybody else's. They wear red ones, and they are twice as expensive as everybody else's radios because they are of an intrinsic safety standard, so it won't ignite a flammable atmosphere. That flammable atmosphere is based around acetylene. So we're reassessing that because the Grenfell Tower inquiry said, is that your bigger problem? Or is your bigger problem making sure that you've got enough wattage to talk in a building and make sure that it's got a power to get through those concrete walls and all of that kind of stuff? So there's a lot of work going on. I don't think we're going to be confronted by a problem soon, which is, buy new radios and they're obsolete. Or sorry, buy new radios and we're replacing something and you need to buy them again. I don't think I think that's years away.
Okay.
It's quite some years away.
That's very encouraging. I've got a police meeting tonight. I'll pass that on.
I think we're talking sort of 2030-ish, I think, at the earliest in terms of technology available.
What we could propose in the meantime, if this hasn't already happened, is that the digital services team who run the network essentially, and perhaps also a member of staff in the JHA Business Support Unit who's been looking after the replacement programme for JHA, can perhaps talk to a representative of the committee to chefs or whoever is right as a contact for Tetra perhaps across the parishes to make sure that more granular information that Paul's referred to can be shared with each parish lead for Tetra, such as they are, and that to the extent we can help a bit with the approach we've taken to replacement. And it could be that there is equipment that can be redistributed to help. But so let's make sure we have that conversation at that really practical level.
Okay.
We can create the contacts after the hearing if we need to.
It's very encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, that's all our questions done. So thank you very much, everyone.